Say yes to new beginnings.
Yes.
Say yes to new standards of excellence.
Yes.
Say yes to engaging reportage with a difference.
Yes.
Introducing Yes International Magazine. The time to say yes to your dreams and aspirations is here.
Our guest tonight is Mr. Ogunjiofor. Ogunjiofor is the father of Nollywood. He's the man who produced the movie that gave the world what we are celebrating today as Nollywood. And that's talking about Living in Bondage, the iconic movie which he gifted us in 1992. Mr. Ogunjiofor is an actor, a producer, a writer, a director, and a pastor. He's from Amebu in Ebenator, Imo State. He's a graduate of NTA College in Jos Plateau State, where he read film and television production. He's happily married to one of the most beautiful souls that I've encountered, and that's talking about Mrs. Gloria Ogunjiofor. The union is blessed with 4 awesome children. They have 3 boys and 1 girl. Other than Living in Bondage, which Mr. Ogunjiofor produced, acted in, and also scripted, his other works are Circle of Doom, Neka the Pretty Serpent, and Brotherhood of Darkness. We are hoping that he will join us any moment from now, so that together we can listen to him as he shares the story of how Nollywood really started. My first question is what the world is celebrating today as Nollywood was triggered by your movie Living in Bondage. Yes. How does this make you feel?
Well, honestly speaking, I must confess that it makes me feel very little. Little in the sense,
like that.
Yes, because when you didn't expect certain things to happen, and then they begin to happen to you, the more, except you are somebody who is bloated with a very big ego, that's the only time you begin to bask in the euphoria of something you know you didn't really, because I didn't set out that it will be this big. But I didn't set out to make it this big, to the point that Nollywood now become second in terms of volume of production all over the world. I mean, if anybody had told me in 1992 that it was going to be this big, I would have doubted it. So when it got this big, the bigger it becomes, the smaller I feel, because it's just an overwhelming experience for me. And then I look at myself and see the size of the industry, see the size of people it has turned out, see the impact it's making in Nigeria and all over Africa. And then I pinch myself sometimes. I say, am I really this person they're talking about? Am I really alive? Of course, because when I remember where I'm coming from, I mean, they says in the Bible that can anything good come out from, from Nazareth? And Jesus came out from there. So oftentimes, honestly speaking, it makes me feel very, very little. But I thank God for making it possible for a homeboy, somebody from the streets, because I know it's a story God wants to tell to a lot of people out there who are trying to eke out a living, that there is hope. Because if I could make it I'm sure there's nobody who cannot. Being on the streets for almost 4 years is not an easy thing, but I thank God for changing my story. Thank you.
Wow, I love that. I love that. Now, I'll need you to tell us the story of Living in Bondage, how you came about the script, the actors you used, the production itself, and any other thing you would like to share with us.
And so this is going to be a very long story because it's almost like a never-ending story, and so if I begin it, but I'll try. I don't know how I can make it within an hour.
Let's just try and summarize.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. First and foremost, I read film and I left school in Jos and came to Lagos as far back as 1987 to find the greener pastures, When we went to school to read this film, nobody believed that anything good can come out of it, because it's not like today that film making or even acting or dancing or music has become a cash cow. In those days, if you had gone to read film or maybe theater arts, people laughed at you as a dropout, because they feel it's people who didn't have the capacity to read sciences and some other courses that go to read those things. And because before that time, no one has really made it big in any of, say, I'm an actor or I'm a film producer. In fact, when I went to school, one of my father's best friends asked me, what is production? What are you reading? What do you call, what are you people studying? And you say you're reading production in school. What is it? What does it mean? And he's a very learned man. So when I left that school and came to Jos, the idea was to come and play, make films or at least play on the television format. But the only big organization that will have absorbed most of us that left school was NTA. There was no other broadcast station outside NTA. And there were very, very few filmmaking organizations in Nigeria. And at that time, NTA had an issue. The issue was government embargo on employment. And so from 1987 till up to 1990 or thereabout, there was no employment for anybody. So what it meant was that most of us who went to school to read film or theater arts didn't have any opportunity of having any employment. And so we were just going to gather at Abegi at the National Theatre almost every evening, trying to, blame ourselves for having read a theater or film. Just once in a while you find stage performance that you can partake in, and the pay wasn't quite very, very encouraging. So I began to tell myself that there has to be something that one can do to recreate the practice, so that you can begin to give me just money for myself. I wasn't even thinking originally for the masses, but I knew that if I could create something that would make me have money in my pocket, others would practice it. So I thought of making a movie using a small camera instead of the cine cameras we were trained with. And so in trying to get that done, that idea came. I began to look for the resources to use a handheld camera. We call it VHS camera those days. They were mainly for covering videos. But let me backtrack a little bit so you can see the origin of the story Living in Bondage itself. When I left school and came to, as I was coming to Lagos because of that embargo, someone in the school who lectured me gave me a note to Shingo Wingwe, who was then the DG of NTA, because my result was very good. And he just felt that whether embargo or no embargo, there must be a way this man will squeeze you, the DG, because he has a contact with the DG. So he gave me that letter. So I took it to Shingo Wingwe at the NTA headquarters. He read the letter and was very, very elated when he saw my result. But he couldn't bend the rules. He's a very principled man. So what Shingo did was Elder Shingo is what it's called now. What Shingo did was to write a letter, a reference letter to his friend called Pa Mike. Pa Mike was the world wrestling champion that time. Pa Mike, his name is Chief Michael Opara, and a lot of us Igbos know him, and I think Nigerians know him all over the world. So I went to Pa Mike with that letter at 70 Alhaji Masha in Surulere, just across the stadium. So Mike saw the letter and decided that he will give me an employment. So, but the employment wasn't to make film now, but to my surprise, the employment was just for me to be following him about so that we can do a few coverage of his wrestling, and those, by that time he was even promoting wrestling matches. But it didn't last. It wasn't just 6-7 months before he decided to retire and go back to Neni. Within that short period I was working with him, there was a video coverage that we were hired to go and cover. It was a festival of some sort. Of course, that was what I was told. But on getting to that particular festival at the hockey pitch of the stadium, just across his office at Masha there, it was the fiesta was serious because people came in different regalias, in different cars. It was the pomp and pageantry of traditions was there. So I enjoyed the chants and all that they did there, but I didn't know what it was. But one thing that was very obvious to me was that one young lady was being, I won't call it initiation because I didn't know it was initiation. That what I thought they were doing was that they were honoring her for having done well for the association. And so she was dressed in so much costumes that was so beautiful. And yet I now saw a lot of people in different categories, men and women, tying different forms of wrapper across their torsos down. And they will come in, they will drive in with very big vehicles, and then they will change into their costume. And that costume was either white or green or red or black. Then they tie it from their torsos down, and then entered into the place, the arena. And then they sat in their ranks, and we recorded that and I went home. And after which I submitted the tape to them, and they paid. You can imagine that time we charged them a whooping 3,500 naira, and they paid that money without asking questions. So I was worried. So when I now submitted this tape to the young man who gave me the job, who gave us the job, I don't want to call his name here, but he's on the public domain already. But when some of these things will have to enter my memoir, like people have advised me. So I submitted the tape. So he sat me down and said, "Did you enjoy what you saw?" And I said, "Yes. I'm an artist, so everything there looked artistic." He said that if I joined them in this particular cultural festival, cultural group, we called it, that they were going to make me, as a filmmaker, very popular all over the world. They were going to give me help instead of going about looking for money. That they were going to give me help, give me employment. I would just be traveling from all over the world. They were just preaching to me the same way I preached to Andy in the film. So when later, my curiosity was very, very aroused. So I asked him, I said, "What group is this?" So he told me it was ROF, Reformed Ogboni Fraternity.
Wow.
So my body went cold, So because coming from the East, my father and a lot of other people have always talked about, that there was a common rumor that people who join such groups end up using people for ritual. They make money through unwanted ways and all that. So I didn't just like that. So I got offended with him, and I told him, I said, "Is that where you?" He said he belongs there because he was a bootlegger. He was a bootlegger, and he said, "Why do you think anytime they arrest me, I go to police station and I come back in 5 minutes?" It's the time that once you go and make sign and you want to belong and make sign anyway, you'll be free. He said a lot of things, but I left him dejected. But he began to say something to me that day, that if now that he has told me who he is and who they are, that if I don't join them, he began to cut himself and not me. And so I said, "Well, you are the one who will carry all the costs." So I left there. So this is the premise upon which, when I might now resigned from wrestling and retired and decided to go home to Neni, he wanted me to go with him because he set up a gym, that place. And I said, "No, that's not what, I didn't leave the East to Lagos to go back again to the East in whatever guise." So he left alone. But what it meant was that there was no job for me. So I now went to the streets because I said there has to be some way I have to raise money to start making a film, which is one of the things I had learned in school. I said, I need to make a film, but I need to get money. So by the time I started knocking on doors, told my parents who were teachers and who didn't have money to give me, I didn't have rich uncles, I didn't have personal friends, I was still a young boy. There was nobody. Even if I had found a bank that would have given me money, there was no collateral. I mean, there's nothing I have in my life. So it meant that there's only one thing my father will always say to us, that whatever you can do to raise money legitimately to solve your problem or to feed yourself is worth doing. He calls it dignity of labor. So that thing kept ringing in my head. What can I do except to go and begin to hawk on the streets of Lagos instead of wasting away? Because I know that I needed 150,000 naira to tell a story. I have made all the calculations that if there's no cinemas again and Igbos are just the ones who have the capacity with the VHS machines in their homes, VSR, to play home videos, I can just take home videos to them. Instead of taking them to cinema, I take cinema to their homes. That was the calculation, the business plan that I had in my head. So before I began to look for sponsors and finance, I didn't get. So I took to the streets. But you know, I thought I was going to run 50,000 naira in maybe 1 week or two. Once I hawk here and there, 150,000 will come and I'll make a movie. But you know, I remained there ultimately for 4 years. But within the first 2 years, while I was doing that hawking, I ran into somebody, a classmate of mine who served me in secondary school, Kenneth. And Kenneth saw me and said,
which of the Kenneths?
No, not Kenneth Nebo, not Kenneth.
Kenneth Nebo, Kenneth Okonkwọ.
No, not Kenneth Okonkwọ, not Kenneth Nebo. It's called Kenneth Ezike. It was my classmate in Eastern Boys in Janaka.
Okay.
So my life is full of yes, my life is full of Kenneth. So I don't know why so, but that's it. So Kenneth saw me and said to me, "Senior, why are you on the streets? Why are you are too bright to be on the streets? What?" And by this time, I was no longer. Yes, it's quite obvious that this was his senior, but I was no longer looking as good as a young man who left university because he could see some elements of and being on the street for some time. So he said to me, "Somebody is against your destiny, and you need God. You need to go to God. You need to go to Christ." So he began to preach to me. I said, "You can take me to church, to his pastor." And you see, when he's saying these things to me, what the young man who wanted to initiate me, who wanted to drag me into the occult, the causes he placed against himself, was ringing on my head. Because one of the things was that I was going to suffer. So when I'm hearing this, I cannot now confirm that somebody is against your destiny. I said, okay, now I understand where this is coming from. So it was easy for me to follow Kenneth to Joe Elegba, to a church called Love Assemblies. Love Assemblies is pastored by Pastor Chris. Yes, pastored by Chris Lamai. Chris Lamai is still a pastor, but he's now in Lekki. So I went to him that Sunday with Kenneth, and to my surprise, the man of God began to say that a wise man is one person who knows one thing about everything, but everything about one thing. He said, that thing that you know everything about it is your destiny. Go back to it. That's what I asked myself. What do I know everything about it? It's filmmaking. So he said, he began to talk. He said a lot of things and entered into his office and came out with a diary and said, write those things down because that's what the Bible said. And then look at the way he wrote his own down when he was young, and everything has come to pass today. That you need to separate yourself and go to God. He will do this, and he began to. And I'm coming from a very, very strong Catholic background, so I didn't think what I wanted to do there was follow Kenneth to church, get deliverance, and walk away from there and go back to my Catholic. So, but when I got there and these things began to happen, I said maybe God is here, and I didn't know. So I said, God, if you are here, show me a sign when I go home. One thing I wanted God to show me was I was smoking. I do smoke in those days. You know, you can't be on the streets without picking up some things. So I picked up smoking, and then I got home that day with Kenneth. See, this is the same Kenneth who took me to God, but he lit up his cigarette. We are all young. Kenneth lit up his cigarette because it was my call, and then said to me, I should smoke. The smoke from his cigarette came to me. And instead of me as a smoker to be aroused by the aroma, I began to throw up. That's how I vomited and vomited and vomited and almost passed out. And then he was surprised. What happened? But I knew what I told God in church. So I knew that God has done something for me. So I walked home. But I put into practice what the man of God said to us. I now locked myself in for 3 days. I took to fasting. I said, God must show me my destiny and answer me for me, so I can write my destiny on paper. I have it written down. Maybe one of these days I'll show you everything. See how God began to answer me from the first word I wrote in that diary to the last word. God,
Wow.
So the first word that came to me on the fourth day was fame. Fame as the pivot upon which my life will revolve. Fame. Then I began to write everything about that fame, how I was going to make fame, how I was going to do all the things that I wrote, even up to my wife, the number of children I'll have, everything is in that diary. But you know, so to some, it will appear that the moment I finished writing that thing, my destiny will be complete, but it wasn't. The moment I finished writing it, the next Sunday I took it to the man of God. He looked at me and read through and used his pen to write Ephesians 3:20 on the diary. Ephesians 3:20 says, now it is left unto God who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can think or ask, even according to the Spirit that works in us. I didn't understand what it meant those days, but it was later that I understood that what the man of God prayed for me was that every dream that I have done is now left for God to fulfill it. And he came to it that way. Now, what am I saying? By the time I finished, by the time this man of God got me this way, I wasn't leaving that church anymore. In fact, I was now going to church almost 4 or 5 times a week because I joined the choir, began to sing. He began to groom me. He began to speak to my life and said, I should be going back to the National Theatre every day since I wanted to make a film, so that I do not lose touch from my background. And so every evening, I will hop till about 6, 7, and then I will retire at the National Theatre to be there and watch my colleagues rehearse till late in the night before I start going back to Ajegule where I was sporting. It was on one day while I was at the National Theatre watching Frank Vaughan and Wale Macaulay, Sidney Diala, Nena Wabeze, Abalo, John, he came, so many of the guys, and they were rehearsing. But as I stood watching them, somebody made a stage mistake, on the stage direction, and he took a wrong direction, and I noticed that it was wrong. So I shouted from where I was. I said, no, that's not right. So, you know, they didn't actually know what I was made of. So they began to ask me to leave them instead of distracting them, because you see, when you are where people are rising and you make such noise, some of them will lose their lives. So they started pushing me out. But Frank Vaughan said to them, what was the mistake? Why did I do that? And I told him, I said, the reason why I shouted was that this person who took this line here, I should have taken it there, and then here this action will take place. As I was talking about the lines on the stage, because there are imaginary lines on the stage that every stage performer must know. As I was using those terminologies, Frank said, wow. I said, try what I said now. You see that people will give you standing ovation. And humbly, he was the director, but he took that, just asked them to try it. And wow, he saw the difference and everybody clapped. That was the day Frank said to me, why don't you come? We are trying to shoot, we are rehearsing to shoot a soap opera pilot for NTA. That time, Vices was the name of that program. Okay. Vices. And Frank Vaughan is still alive to corroborate some of these things. So, and he said, why don't you come and be helping, join us, let's do this in together. And and I told him, I said to him that this is why I was on the streets. I was trying to raise money, but I am not. He said, no, you can. As we were discussing, Ruth Osu, who played Nana in Checkmate, was also on that set. Ruth came to me and said, boy, you're so good. Why are you on the street? You're saying join us, and you say you're on the streets. I told Ruth, I am on the streets because I didn't know her dead, so I called her madam. I said, I'm on the street because I'm looking for money. I want to tell a story on film using a handheld camera it's going to cost me so much, but I do not have that money. That's why I'm on the street, not because I'm not a graduate. So he said, join us. I'll give you a referral to somebody who will help, who I know will sponsor you. That's how Ruth gave me a referral letter to Chief Kenneth Nebo. So I took the letter to Chief Kenneth Nebo, and he said, I know Ruth, but are you the person he's talking about? I said yes, because I didn't look like I went to school. I mean, from the streets to. By the time I'm talking about, remember, this is a 4-year story that I'm telling like this. From the moment Kenneth took me to church, it took another 2 years. All this I'm saying, but you said we should summarize it. So that's towards the end of that. My being on the streets is what I'm talking about now. So I went to Kenneth Nebo, and that's where the whole story began to change. And I said to him, "This is what I want to do." And you sell cassettes. So if we can team up, we can look at my blueprint. Igbos are, let's just say that Igbos are 10 million people in a Nigeria of 100 million people. If 1% of them buy our film, we are in money. And by that time, a cassette was sold for 300 naira. So if I could sell 100,000 cassettes or even 1 million cassettes, I wasn't thinking of 1 million, I was thinking of 100,000 cassettes. 100,000 cassettes at 300 naira is so much money. It's so much money if you put in 150,000. So this is what gave rise to the story, and then we began to tell. Yeah, so that's it.
Wow, I love that. So eventually, how much on the whole did you people spend shooting Living in Bondage Part 1? Can you remember?
Well, except for the monies for the buying of the empty tapes, the shooting and editing of Living in Bondage cost 150,000. And
150,000.
Yes, and I have. I'm happy to say that 2 of the guys who work with me in the studio, one of them is still on. Ni Urola. If you check out Ni, it's one of the guys who worked with me on the. He was on the Amiga console to do the end credits and the montage and all those things. Then there is Sam Ekandem, who is now in Apapa. He works with one of this advertising agency. I can't remember his name now. Then there is another person called Victor Nemosa. Victor Nemosa is in the US. Incidentally, these 3 guys who were with me in the studio to did the film, none of them speak Igbo.
Wow.
So we want quality. 2 of them were working at Swift at that time.
Okay. Swift Studios.
Studios, yes. Lord Weaver Swift Studios. That's where they were.
Wow.
And they're very much alive today, so that some people can corroborate some of these things. Another person that, although he died last year, is Hamid Oguntade. Hamid Oguntade, by the time Chief Kenneth Nebo decided that this film would be made, because by then Chief Kenneth Nebo had made a film called Ajani Yami. So he wanted Hamid, who did that slapstick, to direct this. And I said, no, that's not what we're trying to change what is to what should be. And the type of film I'm talking about is something that will be locally produced with a small equipment, but we're going to do it the same way foreign films are made, so that all the technicals will be there. So he said, what do I want? I said, I needed an SVHS camera instead of an ordinary VHS camera. I needed so he traveled for it. One thing about Kenneth is that he's freak for excellence. He traveled to get that equipment. And brought it down. And then I went to NTA. I went to NTA to bring one of the guys who was a guest lecturer to us in those days, Chris Obirapo. Chris Obirapo is a notable director. Yes. But he was working with NTA at that time, so he couldn't use his real name in the film. So he called himself Vic Mord. And then 2 of us worked on that movie. And then he brought in that professional touch, interpreted the story. But you see, he's an Igbo person, but he is not, he's from Ikaibo. So the type of Igbo we were speaking there is not something I would have left him alone to go and edit. After directing the movie, he went back to NTA so I now went to the studios to do the technicals. That's where I did the editing, because of course the story was what I saw on the fields of national stage that I
Yes.
began to
Okay.
recreate.
All right. Now I love that. I love that.